Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Hello, 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 and welcome yet again to the program. It be a Friday, thank God, 10/24/14. And man, am I one lucky woman, because a guest just dropped into my lap. I got to tell you, get a little closer here, too, because I'm not seeing all of you. There she is, a guest, and not just any guest. This woman, I can't wait. I don't know where we're heading exactly in this conversation, but it might be it's going to be educational. That I know. I hope to. Let me just. First of all, name. Her name is Helen Kramer.
Helen Boyd, but yeah. Helen Boyd is the one I use. That's what's on my books. It's my pen name.
Oh, so you want to sell books today? You don't want to be... All right, Helen Boyd. Well, it says right here, Helen Boyd's the nom de plume.
Yes, that's the one I use most of the time in public.
For the otherwise bookish.
Yes.
Gail Helen Kramer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's my legal name. I barely ever use it anymore.
Let me tell you what's going to happen to you when you turn 65. Because it just happened to me, and I am so pissed off. I also have a first name, which I do not use.
Oh, really?
I jettisoned that baby so fast. I didn't, even at the age of 5, I knew I didn't want to use that name. It's much worse than Gail. Gail's fine. Mine's Ida.
Oh.
Yes.
That's old school.
I know. God. So... no one knew my name was Ida. I just used my middle name, Lynn. Lynn. Then I turned 65. Who knew that my Social Security card said Ida Lynn on it? So my Medicare card came Ida L. Cullen. I was just at the doctor yesterday. Twice I was humiliated sitting in the waiting room when somebody called out, Ida?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just telling you.
Well, I was a kid. I was embarrassed of Helen, which is my middle name.
Yeah, Helen's the more old-fashioned name.
It is.
I mean, Helen is
it was my grandmother's name.
Yeah, so was Ida was mine. Yeah,
Gail always struck me as it didn't suit me, so...
Well, I've grown into Ida, I suppose. But
I can aspire then to becoming Gail again.
Gail, but I don't know. It's just maddening. Anyway, so who is she? Well, we're all going to find out together. She is a professor of gender studies at Lawrence University in my home state, Wisconsin. How is my accent?
It's good.
Pretty good?
It's good.
You're not going to fall victim to it, are you?
No, my friends in New York are already making fun of my O's.
Your O's are going. The first to go. The first to go. Yeah. I know. Oh, geez. Fight the good fight. Don't do it.
I'm from Long Island, so I feel like I have resources to keep the accent at bay.
Well, you said I'm from Long Island. I heard a little from Long Island. So anyway, I see on your bio that you're really into the, Buster Keaton, and I could do an hour with you on that.
Awesome.
I would just love to, but we're not. We're going to head into the gender studies area because it's fraught. And this is weird because just yesterday on this show, we had the former, I can't remember his exact title, executive director of the Warhol Museum.
Oh, cool.
Tom Sokolowski. And he went off on, I thought, a really impassioned thing about the courage of transgendered people.
Awesome.
Can't remember what brought that up, but he really did. And then you fall into my lap, and I emailed him today. I said, you might want to listen in to today's show. Okay, so this is not just an area of study for you. This is a thing that's very personal to you.
Yes.
Okay, that's just a lob. It's not a question. And would you just take over from there a little bit?
Sure. When I met the person who is now my wife, she, and this gets difficult with pronouns.
I know. Hang on here.
I tend to retroact pronouns to her current pronouns. So she's a she now, and I tend to use that. But when we met, she was living in the world as a man, and her identity, she'd been someone who was declared male at birth and had been living in the world as a man, was actually acting and a lead actor for a long time. she jokes now that she was just trying to find the guy she could maybe play in the world, but that didn't work out.
Well, that's why she ended up on a soap opera.
She was on a soap opera.
All
That's
My
a long
Children.
time ago. Yeah, that's funny.
What, playing a trans...
Yeah, they had a little plot for a while about one of the characters, I don't even remember the name of the town, was transitioning or thinking about transitioning. And so for the first time, it was a really interesting decision. They brought in a bunch of trans people to actually play the support group that this character on All My Children was going to. It was like the support group of famous trans people, which ended up being funny. So it was my wife and Jennifer Finney Boylan. Trying to think of who else was there now. Gosh, it's a long time ago.
And this is a long time ago, so
now
that was
very...
and think of that. Who's the audience for All My Children? So that whole storyline went out to people all over this country who maybe didn't have a clue.
And it was just, I think, like the year after they had their first, like, lesbian kiss on that show, if I'm not mistaken, or some... other big deal, same-sex thing, maybe just the year before, and then they, like, leapt right into trans
think
stuff.
television gets jumped on all the time. But television has helped America understand or come to terms with this new gender explosion, where it used to be, there's a man, see, and there's a woman. And now all of a sudden there's a spectrum, there's who knows what.
There's a lot, yeah.
There's a lot. And, I remember I was watching Wheel of Fortune. Now, I was watching Wheel of Fortune because it comes on immediately after Jeopardy, which is, that's okay to say you watch Jeopardy. Yes. I watch Jeopardy. And then when it's done, there comes Wheel of Fortune. Well, I watched Pat Sajak introduce the 3 contestants. And they all do the same thing. This is just the way the show goes. Yes, I'm married to my wonderful husband, George, and we have 3 beautiful children, blah, blah, blah. And then the next one, yes, I'm married to my beautiful wife, and this married. And the third one was a guy, and he said, I'm married to my handsome, wonderful husband, and no one blinks, Pat, and the show goes on, and I'm thinking, how many people in Topeka are picking themselves up off the floor right now? But they do that kind of thing.
It's changed. It has changed.
Okay, but a lot of change left.
Sure, for trans people, there's still a lot of change left. Yeah.
So you meet and fall in love with a man who you know is...
She told me maybe after 3 dates. I like to call it the, greatest understatement in the history of the world, but that there was maybe some gender stuff and perhaps some cross-dressing involved in her universe. That turned out to be, dramatically underemphasized information. But we did start going out. So she had just come to New York. I was living in New York, and it was kind of like, if you want to, as a guy, you want to go buy high heels. Like right?
In New York,
you have to do
problem.
A lot more before anyone cares.
Right.
And so convincing her over time that it was okay to do that, and then, the conversations that we had as a result of her wanting to do these things, because I would say just, be a guy who wears heels and dresses, like who cares? And over time, as she started doing more stuff, started realizing that this is not, I'm not a guy in heels. Like, I'm not a guy who wants to wear dresses. I'm actually a woman, and I have to figure out what that's going to mean. And so we were already at that point married. Certainly. But I knew the whole time from the very beginning of the relationship that there was gender stuff.
You married a man who cross-dressed, and you were fine with that.
Sure, yeah.
And had gender issues.
Right, I always forget that that's a first thing. Yes, but I was fine with that because I figure everybody's weird.
Oh, God, yeah. And and were you comfortable if I'm going to use the old pronoun, if he... was in a dress and heels, and you would go out with him? Or was this just in the
We did. In fact, that's what was, in the beginning, that was what was really fun, is we could go to interesting clubs and dress up in fun ways. And, you know, I mean, it's really exciting to be the one finally who, like, pays the cab driver and opens doors. And I was never particularly good at doing the, like, standard.
So you took over the more what you considered the man's work?
As a, not necessarily in terms of our relationship totally, but when we went out, it was certainly something we could play with. And that became fun because she was also in a spot where she was more insecure being out. Like, she wasn't her, you know, in her usual self. So, and I was usually. So I was in clothes. I was more familiar with the persona. It was just me.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit easier for me, I think, to be able to do those things. So she could worry about, you know, where her bag was and all the new stuff that she was dealing with. She loves when I tell these stories, really. But it was new. Yeah. It was new to her. She was also, like, always overdressed in the beginning. But
because she could.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So. And then it took a couple of years. I went online, I'm going to say in 2000 maybe, to start looking for community. And I was trying to find just sort of other girlfriends of people who were gender-rear, who cross-dressed. Yeah. And I found groups of people who were really, really upset. I mean, that was what struck me, is that I found these
When you
wives,
found the groups, they were meeting and they were freaked.
Yeah. And freaked out, and a lot of them felt betrayed. But these were women who were finding out after 20 years of marriage, you know, totally different thing. And so in my quest to kind of find other people who were more in my position, I found a lot of people who maybe didn't fit into the same categories as easily, like cross-dressers and transsexual people tend to have kept very separate from each other.
Is it okay?
Who knows why?
Okay. Quick question: is a cross-dresser the same as a transvestite?
Yes, except that American cross-dressers don't like the term transvestite.
Okay, but that is the same.
Yeah,
Is it ever? Does that? It could be a woman who dresses as a man, or a man who dresses as a woman. Okay,
right.
That's okay. I just wanted to, because I think the nomenclature can get so confusing.
And that's really the word that starts the whole thing, right? That's, sorry, gender studies thing for a moment, but 1910 is when the term transvestite is coined, and all the other trans words come out of that. They come after that. So it's a little, to me, it's a little sad that cross-dressers in the U.S. don't use transvestite, because it's really the name. It's a very sympathetic psychologist who coined it, who specifically was looking, a lot of people, right, were looking at homosexuality at the time to figure it out. And he was the first one who kind of went, wait, there's this other phenomenon here. These men seem to actually date and marry women happily, too, but they're also dressing as women. And so he kind of went, this is a different thing than the gay men that he was looking at. So
it's different than okay, I'm going to muddy the waters.
Go ahead.
A drag queen.
Sure. That's a difference in style, though, too, right? That's not.
But is a drag queen is a man who loves to flamboyantly appear.
That's a key word.
As a woman.
Yes, and has a more theatrical sense.
Right.
Cross-dressers often don't.
They're regular people.
But there are cross-dressers who do drag who are absolutely as fabulous.
Okay.
They just happen to also date women.
Okay.
I've known plenty of drag queens, who date women, but there's a difference between the cross-dressing, which is more like regular clothes.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the drag queen joke is the difference between cross-dressers and drag queens is cross-dressers don't know how to dress well. So
that's right.
Cross-dressers don't appreciate it, but that's the joke, yeah.
Well, I was saying to a woman I don't know where I was, but she said, I can't tell if that's a man or a woman. Mm-hmm. And I looked, I said, whoa, she's gorgeous. It's a man. Why is that those dang...
I don't know.
All right. They tend to be gorgeous. I don't know.
Yes.
Okay, so where were we? Okay, so we're back into your life.
I started looking into these groups, found all these people who were very unhappy, started doing more and more research because I was confused by why everybody was so unhappy. And then I said a couple of things, like even in the groups that were getting me, I kept getting kicked out of these groups that I was trying to find community in. So at some point I suggested maybe it would be easier to be bi if you were a woman who married a cross-dresser, and that got me banned from one group. Doesn't seem like a big deal to say now, but... these were groups who were very insistent, right, on being kind of normal and heterosexual, which I always found kind of funny because it's like, well, not so much, right? So, I mean, I knew I was living with somebody who cross-dressed. And even the decision I made, I'd always had a really open, cool group of friends. And even telling people like that, I found I had to make a decision to do it because I wasn't sure who was going to judge what. It's kind of out of the usual realm. And I'd been the girl in high school all the gay boys came out to. So I expected support, but I wasn't ever quite sure.
Okay,
so I knew why they were kind of invested in sort of staying in their category, safer category of being heterosexual. And for me, it was like, this doesn't feel very heterosexual to me. So maybe I need some new words and some new community and figure out who I can actually talk to about this stuff. So slowly over time, that's how the books happened.
Your first book was?
My Husband, Betty, who...
and now in its 6th printing.
It's been out there for far long. You don't write a book about cross-dressers and expect it to exist 10 years later.
No.
But it does. And that's kind of nice. And I still get email from people, thanking me for it. So the information, even though for me it feels very dated, all of the he pronouns in it all seems really old. For people who are reading it now or discovering cross-dressing in their relationships,
it's just where it's exactly where they need to be. I think that's you've moved on. So at some point, your husband became your wife, and how that has to be daunting. I can't even imagine.
It's probably one of the hardest things I've ever. And you say you've done it, but staying married in general, right, is not.
How many marriages survive what you?
Far more than people would think. It's really kind of surprising. Trans people who are married to women tend to do a little bit better. In terms of the marriages surviving. But more of us are out there than you'd think who make it through a transition. And who knows how long, or relationships change over the process of a transition. Certainly, there's stuff like that happens. But it's surprising.
So then people see, I know how people say, okay, so wait, she married a man, they're in a heterosexual relationship, and then he became a woman, and so that means he's a lesbian.
Yeah,
and then you all of a sudden became a lesbian.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't. There's not a magic switch, sadly. That would have made things a lot easier.
Oh.
No, I was always somebody I would self-define as something like heteroflexible, maybe even before we met. But it's just kind of a really complicated process. I don't know how to really explain it, other than that, if you love somebody and they're happier. And we had this amazing, awesome friendship and still do. It just seemed like the cool thing. My decision was really that if this person had been my friend, I would have been the best, cheerleader. I would have been the person, making the doctor's report, that kind of ally. And I always was. And so I just thought, well, if this is my husband, somebody I love the most in the world, why should I all of a sudden, freak out and tell her not to do these things that are her path to self-fulfillment? I didn't know that the marriage would stay intact, but it's well, that's my own kind of whatever ethics was. I would expect the same from her if there was something I was doing that was going to complicate our marriage, So, yeah, it's an awesome relationship still.
Does it blow your mind how other people are so damn curious about other people's
everything,
sexuality?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I realized that I'd come to a certain point where we were out one night at a lesbian bar in New York, which I don't think exists, and lesbians were asking us how we had sex. And I just thought, it's historically, we've now come full circle.
Exactly.
Because at the time we were still heterosexual.
Lesbians would ask you how to have sex. How you were having sex.
We might have been heterosexual still at the time, or something like that. But it was really awesome. I was really, lesbians are asking me. Okay, yeah.
Well, I find, what do I know? I find that gays and lesbians often are just as flummoxed about trans as I am.
Mm-hmm. Everybody is flummoxed about trans stuff.
What percentage of the population do you think would identify? Nobody has a clue.
Nobody knows. There are some, you can find larger and smaller estimates just as you can with LGBT in general, but who knows? More than we think. I can guarantee that there are far more people who are trans and living in the world that people don't know are trans than you'd probably ever expect. I mean, people think because they see somebody and they can tell that they're trans, that's what all trans people seem like, that you can read their birth gender. Of course not. You know, there's plenty of trans people. And then there's some of the cross-dressers who identify as transgender. Some do, some don't. There are drag queens who identify as transgender. Some do, some don't. It really depends on the individual's thing.
Do you understand how, though, complicated and sort of mucked up it gets even in that more sort of progressive gender community?
Sure.
In some respects, it reminds me of a room full of lefties. Everybody's arguing. Nobody agrees on anything. So there's this one. No, I will not be considered a that. No, I am a this. No, you will not. And what ends up happening is this total. I mean, I was thinking all of these words need to just be jettisoned. I mean, we just need to be people.
Yeah.
When is that going to happen?
Good luck with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
that's what I find great about it. It's one of the things I love about working for and in the trans community is how many different varieties of gender identity and expression are out there. To me, it's vibrant. I mean, there's something that, you talk to people who sort of assume they're who are female and are feminine and assume certain things about how and who they are.
And then your mind gets blown.
And it's just like, oh, wow, that seems like a very limited way to live in the world. Like, it really does seem restricted to me.
I see.
People who are very traditional.
But some people could present that way but surprise you.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you don't know.
That's an awesome thing, too. But, yeah, the trans community has all this. There's a lot of different people kind of struggling and reinventing themselves, which is also kind of amazing to be around and inspiring to be around. You kind of can't make excuses for your own self not doing that thing that you really want to do when you're around people who basically put everything on the line to change their lives. So
I think when Tom yesterday used the word courage, he hit the right word.
Yeah.
It takes a lot.
Lot. They live,
Yeah, there's families. There's mothers who thought you were. There are siblings and friends, and
right.
It's got to be.
Yeah, and a lot of trans people end up with a lot of close people who were close to them estranged.
Right.
Sometimes that's just a period of, a process period that a year, 10 years later, who knows who comes back around. Parents do. Even parents who people weren't convinced wouldn't. They do tend to come back around, but it takes a while for some.
Oh, sure. What? So, okay. LGBT. B. Wait a minute. Lesbian. I'm just trying to, because a lot of us are getting lost because that alphabet soup is getting
it's long
bigger.
now.
Yeah, right. Okay. LG, lesbian, gay, LGBT, bi, T. Now there's confusion about is that trans? Is that okay? T, Q.
Q.
Now what the hell is queer?
You have to ask every single queer person you know, and they can tell you what they mean by queer. I mean, for a lot of people, I use it because it's an umbrella term. Like, I don't feel comfortable telling people I'm a lesbian. But you can't really insist on telling people that you're a heterosexual woman when you're married to a woman either. So
that's difficult.
Queer is kind of a nice umbrella for me to kind of go, okay, my gender's a little not regular, and my marriage is a little not regular. And that kind of covers both.
So queer is just this sort of more
depends on
grab bag if you don't fit comfortably into any. But there's something after the Q now.
Yeah, there's
what?
I's and A's. There's intersex and there's androgynous. Sometimes there's another Q for questioning. There's asexual. How many others am I forgetting?
Well, why don't you just say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J? Why just jettison the whole damn thing? It's getting crazy.
I agree.
You do?
Well, it just gets incredibly complicated, and you get to a point where you're dealing with a lot of people who have a lot of different identities. And I don't mean jettison it because it's a bad thing to do.
No, but it does. It's not helpful. It just confuses.
It confuses people, but it also gives people a lot. They know there are other people like them. They know there are safe spaces for them. I mean, it's still hard to live as any of these identities in the world. Yeah. So that's really why that's why the alphabet keeps expanding, is the recognition that there's still people out there who aren't.
Who don't feel included.
Yeah.
But there always will be. I mean, if it is a spectrum,
Yes.
then there are billions of different kinds of sexuality and identification.
Sure.
Right?
Well, when Facebook came out with their like 57 possible gender identities, there were people going, "Well, mine's not on there," and it's like, come on,
57, and I'm not on there.
It might be 58, but
You're kidding.
yeah, that's the possibilities. And you can multiply check them, so you can have 4 or 5 at the same time. You don't have to choose between the 58. You can have like 6 or 7 as a grouping. That might kind of make things work. And I think that's awesome. I mean, there's no reason for it to be two like, what's the reason for 2 choices? It's kind of boring.
Wow. So you're a professor of gender studies at Lawrence University, which sits in Appleton, Wisconsin, which gave rise to Senator Joe McCarthy.
Yes, right. I've been to his grave.
Have you?
You almost can't not, right? It's especially visiting. When I was first there, I could
that
not resist.
amazing?
Yeah,
God.
it is.
Yeah, you don't want to be known for that. He would not be.
Appleton talks a lot more about the Houdini connection than
They
about
like the Houdini
McCarthy
connection.
Right. So, for
Well,
good
for
reason.
a little town, those are two pretty. Those are
2 big, and
two
interesting.
biggies.
Yeah.
McCarthy and Houdini. Hey. So, are you finding? I think I know the answer to this. That your students, being younger people, are much more non-judgmental, completely open to, or are they as confused as?
The thing that's interesting to me is that younger people don't seem to find they don't have the same need to interrogate trans people about their gender. It's kind of like, oh, you're a woman. Okay. Like, next.
Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you are. And so whatever it is I'm going to tell you that I do or I am, you're going to be cool with that too. And it's not the same like, well, how do you know? And have you done this? And have you thought about that? And, which I think my generation and older certainly tend to do with trans people. It's like, how can you know you're a woman? Where is your proof that you're a woman? And it's like, I don't think they care as much. It's like, okay, you're a woman.
Cool.
Yeah.
So there was this article, which I read last night, and this was the New York Times Magazine from, I guess, last Sunday, and it's called The Men of Wellesley. And you're looking at 3 trans
Guys. Men.
All born and raised as females, and all who applied to Wellesley
Oh, did they? Okay.
as females.
Sure.
It's not clear whether Wellesley would let them in if they hadn't. It's a woman's school. Well, you can't imagine the stuff. I mean, there's so much stuff in this article. Wellesley, you would figure, is a very kind of progressive
Sure.
Environment. Okay, so let's get to. I just want to run some of this by you. There's a guy, a junior. He came in as a female, and now he introduces himself from the start as masculine of center, gender queer.
Masculine of center is kind of one of my recent favorites in terms of terms because gender is often so relative, and that's
Right.
definitely one that kind of tries to work with that. So instead of saying I'm a man or I'm masculine as if that's a
So he's just saying, it's like if we were to say on the political spectrum, left, right.
Sure.
Well, I'm a little to the right. Right. So
Yeah.
okay.
masculine of center, so more masculine,
More masculine than female.
Yes, more masculine than feminine.
And I don't know what the gender queer is.
Gender queer is somebody, it depends. Sometimes people who don't use binary pronouns or who don't feel that they identify as a man or a woman.
Okay. He decided to run for campus office that was responsible for multicultural affairs coordinator. And he ended up being the only one on the ballot. And an anonymous campaign started at Wellesley that said, it was called the Abstain campaign. And they were saying, don't vote against him. We know him, we like him. Don't vote against him. But don't give him enough votes to win. Here's the woman who started it, says this: it wasn't about him. I thought he'd do a wonderful job, but it just felt inappropriate to have a white man in that position, the diversity position. It's not just about the position either, because having men in elected leadership positions undermines the idea of this place being a place where women can be leaders.
Mm-hmm. But a genderqueer person doesn't identify as a man. I mean, I don't know.
He's sort
I
of.
don't know what his. Yeah, or they
He
are.
said he felt conflicted. He said, yeah, the patriarchy is alive and well, and I don't want to perpetuate it. He won overwhelmingly.
I'm not surprised to hear that.
Oh, man.
Because obviously it's a different experience as well, right? Growing up masculine of center, female-bodied person, you're going to be more aware of gender issues, and gender is a form of discrimination. I mean, trans people are all aware of gender discrimination.
So some of these trans guys go into classes, and teachers who have always had
that's got to be
women
surprising.
in front of them,
right?
And who, whenever they're speaking of anything, they say they use so she would or whatever. And eventually, one of these guys went up to a professor and said, I feel very marginalized.
Sure.
And disrespected.
Well, it's funny, if you do that in a classroom and there's a couple of cis guys in the room, and cis means not trans, people who were declared male at birth and who live as men, and, I say something like, us women or something at the front of the room, they're probably not going to experience that marginalization the same way. But trans men, like I said, they're going to deal with discrimination all the time. So, of course, they're going to notice if their identities as masculine aren't recognized in that classroom. That makes sense to me.
Okay. Big thing at Wellesley is sisterhood. And they have things, there's songs they sing, and there's sisterhood. And all of a sudden, what do you think they changed that to?
Personhood? Humanity?
No. Oh. Siblinghood.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, I think... See, it's the word stuff that make you absolutely nuts.
Yeah, sibling isn't really an awesome word in general, is it? Yeah.
Sibling. Okay.
We just need a new word for that.
Okay. Today's trans young adults do not consider physical transformation a prerequisite for identity.
Mm-hmm. A lot of trans people.
So you mean
that's not new?
I mean, it's not like that means you don't have to have surgery. You don't have to take hormones.
Right.
You just present as you want to present. And okay, try to get this through some more calcified heads. Sexual orientation is independent of gender.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, it makes perfect sense to you, but there's other people saying, wait a minute. Sexual orientation is independent of gender. Well, I just thought gender is sexual orientation.
Right.
I mean,
They've been confused for a long time. I mean, these things have been sort of moshed together. But, the same way that people have figured out, right, that all lesbians don't look like lesbians, right? I mean, we've worked that out.
You mean that's a lesbian? She's fucking beautiful.
And all gay men aren't feminine, right? We know all that
look
stuff
at that.
now.
Yeah, we got football players
so
now. Ooh.
Everybody's already separated gender from sexual orientation. If we don't assume that...
I don't think they got the vocabulary.
Right.
I mean, you guys might have the vocabulary because you're living it and interested in it. And I think a lot of people are not.
Yeah, trans people might be straight. They might be gay. They might not identify in either direction. They might, it depends.
Well, excuse me while I go back through the article because it blew my mind.
That's awesome.
I'm trying. This is one of the things I really have had trouble with. Okay. Last December, a trans masculine Wellesley student wrote an anonymous blog post that shook the school's trans community. The student wrote to apologize for, quote, acting in the interest of preserving a hurtful system of privileging masculinity. He continued, "My feelings have changed. I don't think that trans men belong here. This doesn't mean that I think that all trans men should be kicked out of Wellesley or denied admission. I really don't know what Wellesley should do, but he is, I mean, all of this trouble, and a lot of trans people went bonkers when he posted that. Like, if you want to identify as a man, then what the hell are you doing on a campus
and there are plenty
that
of
is
trans,
for women?
Yeah, there's plenty of trans men who would agree with him.
Really?
That they don't belong there.
But they say, invariably, the trans men say they feel safer.
Yeah. Yeah. And they probably are, for the most part. I mean, this is the whole thing, is you deal with the level of discrimination trans people. Just going to a bathroom, my public bathroom, is a huge hassle because people police gender in bathrooms. So someone who walks in who's too masculine, and other women get upset that she's in the bathroom. Even if she's female identified, even if she's a woman, even if, everything, she's got certification of whatever kind. Still, people get upset because people get uncomfortable. And whether that's because they assume masculine women are a lesbian or whether it's the gender itself, we don't really know. But the sense of, for trans men in particular, again, trans people deal with levels of violence that I don't think we can even...
I can't imagine.
It's crazy. Right, exactly.
Just riding...
Except you can. It's got to be crazy.
Riding here this morning on a Port Authority bus, I sat across from a guy who I've seen on the bus a few times. He always wears the most amazing, clearly he makes them, hat. And sometimes they're like tulle, and they go on and on and on. And today it was like a top hat with feathers coming off it in all kinds of ways, and there was something coming down here. And he had nail polish on, and he wears this long black coat. And he's a big guy. And I'm thinking, thank God you're a big guy. Because, if that's how he feels himself, and if he were a little guy, he'd be getting beat up all the time. He probably still is getting beat up.
Even the big guys
get beat up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Threatened, certainly. They don't necessarily feel safe.
Here's a weird thing, won't be to you. So now that there's quite a number of trans men at Wellesley now.
Sure.
And one of the lesbians at Wellesley said that she views these trans men as competitors in the campus dating scene. Here's what she says. With the women. Women flirt with the trans guys. They hook up with them. And it's not just the hetero women, but even people in the queer community. The trans men are always getting this extra bit of acknowledgement. Even though we're in a woman's college, the fact is men get more attention and more value in this social dynamic than women do.
Well, I mean, what part do we not know already as feminists, right? That, of course, yes, men get more attention, but trans men, too, kind of complain sometimes about feeling fetishized. Feeling like people are specifically flirting with them because they're trans.
And because
and that there's like a badge of, I'm cooler than you because I've had a trans boyfriend.
That's exactly what Timothy, the guy who won the election, says.
Right.
He says, I think trans bodies are seen as sort of an in-between option. So no matter your sexuality, a trans person becomes safe to flirt with or to explore with. Sure. But it's not really the person you're interested in. It's the novelty. And then he says, for lesbians, there's the safety of, I may be attracted to this person, but they're really a woman, so I'm not actually bi or straight. And for straight people, it is, I may be attracted to a woman's body, but he's a male, so I'm not really. And that's how he sees it.
Everybody's got an out for whatever identity they feel themselves to be without upsetting that. It's interesting. I mean, as someone who certainly has been attracted to trans people and all kinds of trans people, including trans men, it's really, for me, it's as you might imagine, having some awareness of gender is a thing that's attractive. to somebody who's got stuff about gender. So I don't think it's like an accident even that I met my wife or that worked, because we were both kind of dealing with gender stuff. And I think that's one of the things that happens with trans people, is that there are a lot of people who feel restricted and limited by their own gender identity or their own gender expression. And so like dating somebody trans sort of gives people a spot to sort of play with that.
I bet. So
not that that's the right thing, who knows what the right thing is. I don't know.
So anyway, colleges, women's colleges, which are sort of under assault by economics, I guess they're fighting for their lives. They're turning co-ed left and right.
Sure.
Chatham University here just gave it up and went co-ed, much to the horror of their alumna. Mm-hmm. And yes, we have a call. Okay. Hello, caller. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, Lynn, it's Tom Zagorski.
Oh, Tom. Hi.
I think the program has been quite wonderful. I think one point, though, that hasn't been said is that there is a certain, efflorescence or glow to people who want to stand out. I mean, on the one level we say, the campus queen or the football player. But I think something with some of these trans people, it's not so much about, I think, the secretism or the newness. Because, hey, someone who has the balls or not, part of the fun, you sort of get out there. And, I mean, I think of the famous model in England, Quentin Crisp, who was, quite sort of atrocious in his manner, and he could equal your bus coach.
Yeah, exactly.
But his point was, I remember his line, walk straight ahead, never turning one way or this way, just moving forward. And he did get up, beat up, certainly. But people sort of admired him. Oh, my God, he has the gall to do that. And I just wanted to share one episode that I dealt with or was responsible for specifically. We had a show at the Andy Warhol Museum many, many years ago when I first started. It must have been 1996. And it was a show called A Rose is a Rose is a Rose, after Gertrude Stein, a poem, Gender, Identity, and Photography. And it was a show that the Guggenheim Museum in New York had done, and I saw it, and I thought it was perfect for Warhol, who dealt with issues of transgender and cross-dressing, etc. And in addition to the works of art that went all the way back to the early 20th century up to the present, we had a number of events. And one of them was on Sundays during the 3 or 4 months run of the show. We had different people who dealt with notions of beauty. One time we had a former Miss Pennsylvania, and another time we had a fashion expert, etc. And one time we had a transsexual. And this transsexual was not very beautiful. I mean, sort of Broderick Crawford with a hat, if you can think of that.
Hey.
And I always went along with these tours, both as a kind of defense mechanism in case there was trouble, but also in case someone said something incorrect about the art, I could correct it, because in this case, like the transsexual woman, she wasn't an art historian, but she gave this tour and had some interesting insights. But I remember through it, there was this couple who came, this one man who looked like, he was wearing a Steelers jersey, and I thought, oh my God, there's going to be trouble, whatever. And at the end of the tour, this woman, the transsexual, said, are there any questions? And this man put up his hand, and I said, oh my God. And he said, ma'am. And I almost started to cry, because I thought this person giving the tour had been so respectful, so bold as to speak about herself as well as what she saw as a mirror of herself in these images. And I thought that was sort of one of the proudest moments I had in my almost 15 years at the museum.
Just that he addressed her as ma'am?
Well, right. I mean, it's someone you would never expect to say that. I mean, and he had listened, and probably he had never dealt with a transsexual, and let alone not in one of the glory rooms of a Carnegie Museum of Pittsburgh. And he had learned something. And I thought, this is how this all begins.
Well, also at play, though, is your feeling that any any male wearing a Steeler jersey is a wife
Well,
beater.
no. I didn't know. And that was what I said that I do. Oh, Lynn was going to jump on this. But I just mean he came across as
I know.
egregiously male.
Okay, yeah.
You know,
Right.
a bro, as they might say.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
But anyway, so I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. So,
And you never know. Who's going to be accepting is always surprising.
yeah, I bet it is.
Sometimes very conservative people don't even blink, and the most liberal,
Is
awesome people have a very hard time. So.
Is religion the biggest impediment? No.
I mean, sometimes it is. And when it is, it's quite an impediment, I guess, I would say.
Yeah.
But it's not always. There's a lot of...
Don't you think it's funny how the Catholic Church dresses up in, all those guys in their red shoes
but the Pope
and
just
jewelry and
demoted
dresses? I know.
the guy who's the big dresser, so
Yeah.
it's killing me. Yeah. But
they get to dress up in dresses and stuff and finery.
Men used to be the ones who dressed.
Who are
in
the peacocks.
all of the natural world, right?
Yeah,
It's
the
the males of the species that are supposed to put on the show. So.
Yeah, and the women are little brown hens.
Which, that's sometimes easier, yeah.
Oh, my God. So, it turns out I was saying that... Oh, we got another call? Yeah, the floodgates have opened. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hi. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't really want to be on the air. I was calling about your one-woman show.
Oh, well, what do you want to know?
I want to know when it is.
November 17th.
Where at?
At the Cabaret at Theater Square, but you have to go to Planned Parenthood's website to get your tickets.
Thank you.
Planned Parenthood of Western Pennsylvania, ppwp.org.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, it's too bad. We as I said, it's held together by chewing gum. We do not have a ability to screen calls, but that was a very nice call. No problem. If I can sell a ticket to the show, let's do it. So I was talking about how women's schools, the very idea of what is it now, has been called into question. And some are having, there was a school, and I forget which one it was, I never heard of it before. They have come down on the not here side. They now are saying if you don't, they said any trans students that are there, here it is, Hollins University. You ever heard of that? Mm-hmm. They say that they now have a policy stating it will confer diplomas only to women. It also said that students who have surgery or begin hormone therapy to become men or who legally take male names will be, quote, helped to transfer to another institution. Mm-hmm. But I think that's not the norm for what's going on at women. You don't know?
I don't think so either. I don't think it's the norm. No, I think generally speaking, women's colleges are trying to be, and I emphasize the trying to be, open to trans people. What's interesting is these women's colleges sometimes have a very hard time with trans women who are incoming. So
well, that's what I want to tell you. That's what they won't let in.
Yeah.
I mean, Wellesley, for instance, will, first of all, they will still consider only, you got to check female on your application or you're not going to be considered.
Right.
Also, Wellesley will not admit a trans woman. So just in case the nomenclature's making your eyes roll around in your head, that means somebody who was born male, who identifies as female, and, of course, then would want to go to a woman's school, perhaps. Right. But Wellesley won't let that person in. They will let in women who present as males after they get through the front door, if they don't tell them that's what they're doing.
As long as they haven't legally changed their gender to male by the time they're applying.
Exactly.
Right.
And they say, so what would be the reasoning behind that?
Why would they welcome them?
No, why would they not welcome? They welcome only trans males.
Trans women often have getting a gender marker changed on all of your documentation is very hard. So I know there was one student, I think, who applied to Smith, who was a trans woman, and she had something that was still had an M on it. I mean, she had accepting parents, and she was applying because she wanted to go to women's college because she was a woman. And she had one like residual document that in all of the financial aid or something came up
With M.
with an M, and then
Out.
she was out. Smith, a lot of Smith alum, frankly, were very upset about it too. There were petitions and all of that stuff. So, I mean, how this is going to be navigated, and a part of me is I'm sure this article, I wish I had read this already, but I've been on the road. But the sense of how we define women, but women's colleges are more than just women's organizations, right? I mean, they're at heart feminist. The idea that you're giving an education to people who have historically been just denied an education. Pardon me, trans people fit into that mission just fine. I mean,
exactly, which is why these rather progressive women's colleges are just going through agonizing about all this, because on the one hand they think we know what it's like to be marginalized, we know what it's like to be discriminated against. On the other hand, why is it that as soon as these trans men come in, they're becoming the student council president, they're the ones who are speaking out most in class, and here we go again with the girly girls receding into the wallpaper.
But would people be asking the same questions if those were just women who were more masculine than their peers?
Of course not.
No, it's the gender marker difference.
No, right.
But you're still dealing with people who were effectively raised female for the most part,
right.
and
they've been
lived in the world.
socialized that way. They know it,
and have lived in the world as trans. I would argue
right.
that's. I mean, for me as a feminist, I like an inclusive feminism, right? That would include people who have experienced discrimination because of gender or race or lots of other things, right? So, but it really depends on how you want to think about discrimination, what it is, what the goal of a women's college is. I mean, I don't run one, so I don't write these mission statements, and I would have never, frankly, wanted to go to one myself. So that's
I
think that's important too.
Are you aware of I mean, Lawrence is a relatively small school.
Mm-hmm. Small. You
have trans students?
Plenty, yes.
Plenty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they fit in. They're I think generally speaking, well received by their colleagues. We have a pretty strong LGBTQ group on campus, and Lawrence is very welcoming. So, I mean, we're still working on policy. That's
because that's a sticky issue.
Well, it's tricky when you're dealing with younger people.
Wait. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Too, and so people can't always make the changes that they'd want to change. And we all know college is a time when people figure out their identities often,
right.
And so there are a lot of younger trans people who may not have the support of their parents, and so they can't change documents or anything before they get there, and then they often feel like they're in the wrong places or being put in the wrong spots or whatever. We have a conservatory too, so it brings up all sorts of other interesting issues as to whose voices, which kind, and where people sing, and so it's a lot of different things to navigate.
Is this a tenor or an alto?
Exactly. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff, and I think that there's a lot of people who are really just trying to be. Lawrence, I have found, is very welcoming, even for people but it's a very small place too. So when people are trying to figure out how it works, as you'd imagine, I might get a phone call or two, right, when things are going
I bet.
on.
Yeah.
But it's generally speaking, seems like it's been a very good place
and a safe environment.
Yeah.
Can the same be said of the town around it, which at one point elected Senator Joe McCarthy?
We just passed a non-discrimination ordinance in Appleton that is trans inclusive, that is gender identity and expression inclusive. So that was awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, one more thing to knock to throw away at you from this article. Okay, so now we move to Mount Holyoke. Mm-hmm. Okay. It announced a far-reaching policy just last month. Okay, here's what Mount Holyoke has decided. It would admit all academically qualified students, regardless of their anatomy or self-proclaimed gender. There's an except. except for those biologically male at birth who still identify
As male.
as male. That's the only ones that are getting discriminated against. Guys who want to be guys.
They're not, well, you know. Are
Right.
they discriminated against anywhere? I mean, that's what I would say. Is that's the mission of the school, right?
Yeah,
is to deal with
So you
people.
think they got it right?
Yeah, that sounds
Is
the
what-
most right of all the policies that I've heard. Because that would be
So-
open to trans women. That would be
Yeah, it'd be open to
trans men
everybody
and
except
women,
men.
cis women.
When you say cis, how's that spelled? CIS?
CIS. Yeah,
Why?
it's
What
a
does
term that
mean?
comes out of chemistry, from what I know.
I think- yeah,
it means
so what?
it means not trans, on the same side as. So not crossing. If trans means straight crossing, then cis is on the same side.
Okay.
It just
all right.
means not trans.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, so Holyoke says eligible candidates now include anyone born biologically female, whether identified as woman or man, neither or other, and anyone born biologically male who identifies as a woman or other.
Sure.
And the school's president said, we made this decision after concluding it was just simply an issue of civil rights.
That's awesome. It's good to hear. Yeah.
And I'll give that to you for your
Great,
reading
thank you.
pleasure, The Men of Wellesley. Oh, my God. What an interesting world we live in, huh? Jeez. So, Helen here writes books. And your most recent book or anything you want to hawk,
No, I'm working on the third one now.
which is what? About?
It's part 3 of the trilogy, as I'm
Okay,
thinking
well-
of it. So it's the follow-up, because a lot of
Okay,
people
so we
don't
have
know
My
that
Husband Betty, which we talked about. And what
Right.
was the second?
She's
then?
not the man I married. Right now, the working title of the third one is Giving Him Up. But that's the working titles, right? They always change.
Are these like very personal and autobiographical?
yes.
They are. And how does your wife feel about
She's
that?
awesome. So I call her the best writer's wife that's ever existed in the world, because, you know, it's a handful to deal with a writer, because we're cranky. But she, literally, her thing to me was, I was like, are you sure it's okay for me to, you know, I mean, at some point I refer to her, you know, early dressing and all of stuff. This is not necessarily, it's kind of embarrassing in some ways to her now, but she literally just said to me, tell the truth. If you can write these, and even if you can tell people way more information than I'd prefer, tell them the truth. If it's going to be helpful to other people, if it's going to get other people, because there's so many people who are so locked in so much shame. And I mean, as a writer, like, I still get emails from people, and it's the most amazing thing in the world. So it's cool work.
Tell me again the working title for the
Giving Him Up is the working title.
that makes it sound like you're gonna
No.
Giving Him Up.
Right. Yes, because people don't know necessarily.
So-
She was on the verge or considering transition when I wrote the second one. And it's much more about my gender and my relationship with change. But this one I want to be more about what it's really like to be somebody who's doesn't have a husband anymore, but I still have this person I live with who reminds me of him a lot. So it's my husband and not my husband in some ways at the same time. So it's about a lot of
wondering
things.
if
It's
you-
also about being
All
an
right,
ally to the trans community.
I'm just
for a long
wondering
time.
if you would. Never mind. Well, on some level you might miss
Right. Some things.
a male. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, but would you? I mean, is it cool? Does she understand that?
I probably get
'Cause
maybe a little bit more room to flirt with men than
That's what I was.
than-
Thank you.
than
That's what I
most.
was going to ask.
Yeah,
Flirt.
yeah,
is okay.
certainly. Yeah,
but
and
not.
I've always had kind of adopted big brothers. Frankly, I've always said I have 3 older brothers, and I've always liked. I'm a tomboy. I've always liked having guys around, so she knows that, and she knows I miss it. So. You know, once you've made room in your marriage for a transition, believe me, I get a little flexibility. So.
Wow. I just love this. Thank you for absolutely dropping
awesome.
into. I want to thank Jason Toggier at Carnegie Mellon, who I guess is a listener to this program, for just saying, hey, a friend of mine's coming in town. I wonder if you'd be interested in.
Right.
And I'm so glad. This
Likewise.
I find this absolutely fascinating, and I do feel a lot more with it.
Feel free to let me know if you ever have any
Some
weird questions
or
about trans
something.
stuff. Sure.
So you have a blog. You might want to tell people about where to.
MyHusbandBetty.com. someday I'll change the blog URL, but once you've had a blog, it's more than 10 years old. It's one of the oldest blogs on trans issues. And I still write there. I don't write as often as I used to, but
I was reading, I think, your last post last night, and God, you were like saying, "Come on!" You were like screaming. You were screaming at people
Jenny McCarthy just said she feels trans inside, and it's like, gosh.
Oh, Jenny McCarthy.
Right. So
how does this woman how hard she works at making stupid statements about things she doesn't know anything about?
Yes, that's really.
Isn't she the one who did the vaccination autism thing?
She's an anti-vax person too, and very.
And now
vocal.
she's saying she feels trans inside.
Yeah, I just saw that, and I just.
Oh, and I saw you just went off the wall.
Yeah.
You can't feel trans inside.
Well,
What'd you say?
it's a way that a lot of allies think that they're going to relate to trans experience, and it's like, because then you go, oh well, if I feel trans inside, now I don't need to transition. Then what are you crazy trans people doing? I've made all these mistakes. I just don't like to see new allies make the same ones. I've done it. I'll said all the dumb things. So.
Oh, I haven't. Jenny McCarthy hasn't either. I got news for you. She's got more up her sleeve, although she's doing damn good at dumb things. So thank you so much, Helen.
Nice to meet you.
Now wait, Helen Boyd is how you're here today. Yes, yep. Okay, Helen Boyd. Monday, I don't have a clue what's going to happen. So tune in and we'll all find out together. Have a good weekend. Mwah.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.